On a rainy autumn evening, a chilling wind blew through the old streets of Baltimore. It was October 1849. A worker was walking home when he noticed a stranger lying in the cold dirt near a tavern. The man looked utterly lost and broken. He was shivering from the freezing cold and whispering sentences that made no sense to anyone around him. Curiously, he was wearing cheap, dirty clothes that were far too large for him, clearly not his own garments. Nobody knew who this helpless person was or how he had ended up in such a terrible state in a dark ditch. When the doctor finally arrived, he stared into the stranger's pale face and gasped in absolute disbelief. The man in the dirt was Edgar Allan Poe, the famous literary genius who had shocked the world with his dark imagination. Only a few days before, he was perfectly healthy and happy, planning his beautiful wedding. But then, he completely vanished into thin air. To understand the shadows in Edgar's soul, we must look back at his early childhood. Born to a family of poor actors, he learned the meaning of tragedy at a very tender age. His father abandoned the family when Edgar was just a baby, leaving his mother to fight poverty and a terrible illness alone. When Edgar was only 2 years old, his mother tragically died of tuberculosis in a cold room, and he became an orphan. He was taken in by a wealthy family from Richmond, Virginia. His foster mother, Frances, loved Edgar deeply and spoiled him with affection, but his relationship with his stern foster father, John Allan, was always cold and filled with arguments. John gave the boy a brilliant education, but never officially adopted him, constantly reminding Edgar that he was an outsider. This painful rejection created a deep, permanent wound in the future writer's heart. When Edgar entered the prestigious university, his life took a dark and chaotic turn. His foster father, fearing the wild student lifestyle, refused to give Edgar enough money for basic living expenses and clothes. Surrounded by rich classmates who spent fortunes in local pubs, Edgar felt desperately poor and humiliated. In a foolish attempt to win money and respect, he started playing cards, but his luck was terrible. Soon, he accumulated massive gambling debts that he could never hope to pay back on his own. At the same time, Edgar discovered he had inherited his biological father's dangerous inability to handle alcohol. A single glass could make him completely lose control. When John Allan found out about the money disaster, he refused to help and angrily dragged Edgar out of the university. Penniless and deeply ashamed, the 18-year-old boy ran away from home to face the cruel world completely alone. Despite his endless struggles with poverty and hunger, Edgar never stopped writing poetry and short stories. He eventually found a welcoming home in Baltimore with his loving aunt Maria Clem and her young daughter Virginia. In this modest but peaceful house, Edgar felt truly safe and inspired for the first time in years. He began writing gothic horror stories and brilliant essays for literary magazines to earn some money. He soon realized that while romantic poems brought no income, people gladly paid to read terrifying tales about madness and death. To the reader's surprise, Edgar wrote his stories from the first-person perspective, which made the horrors feel incredibly real. His unique style quickly fascinated the public, and he became a chief editor. In May 1836, he happily married his young 13-year-old cousin Virginia, whom he loved with all his heart. Edgar's career as an editor was brilliant, but filled with fierce scandals and dangerous enemies. He possessed a sharp mind and absolutely refused to tolerate bad literature, which made him a merciless critic. He publicly destroyed the reputations of wealthy but untalented authors, accusing them of stealing plots from European writers. This proud and uncompromising position increased the magazine's popularity tenfold, but it also created powerful rivals who wanted revenge. They started a vicious campaign against Poe in New York newspapers, falsely calling him a dangerous lunatic and a desperate drunkard. Under immense work pressure and constant stress, Edgar began drinking heavily again to escape his problems. The final, crushing blow came on a cold winter evening when his beloved wife Virginia began coughing blood during a song. She was diagnosed with tuberculosis, the very same dreadful disease that had stolen Edgar's mother so many years ago. During the 5 long years of his wife's painful illness, Edgar lived in a state of constant terror and despair. This deep, agonizing grief inspired his most famous masterpiece, the dark and mesmerizing poem titled The Raven. In this brilliant text, a lonely lover questions a mysterious blackbird about his lost love, and the creature answers with only one chilling word: nevermore. When Virginia passed away, Edgar was completely devastated, but he eventually tried to rebuild his broken life. By the summer of 1849, he was actively working on a new magazine and planning a happy wedding with his first childhood love. Everything looked promising until that fatal October day when he vanished in Baltimore. The political theory suggests that a brutal street gang kidnapped Edgar, drugged him with alcohol, and forced him to vote multiple times in different clothes before throwing him into a ditch to die, leaving his final mystery forever unsolved.